I'm Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion
My
Power
name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. I'm your host, Mel Albin. I'm the founder of this show. And the Power Hour, I created it for a reason. A lot of you love the music that is out there in jazz, and you can go see the artists live, but you don't have a chance to sit down with them for an hour and really get to know them. So I wanted to create a show where you go behind the mind, backstage, and you really get to see how the artist goes about their craft every day to produce the music that we all love. So, there's a lot about the Power Hour that makes it unique. We broadcast weekly on the Source TV radio network. We broadcasted live streaming 4K and Dolby True HD. We're probably the only station that I know of that broadcasts in Dolby True HD. Source Radio, who we broadcast on, is a nonprofit 501c3 radio station supporting jazz artists, and Black and minority micro businesses so that those businesses can build scale, they can get on the finance industry radar, and ultimately create and increase the generational transfer of wealth, assisting both families and communities. So we're looking to create equity and equality, as well as to help promote jazz and jazz artists. We depend on listener contributions and donations and artists who appear on our shows for mutual support, and also sponsors to cover our cost of broadcasting. So any contribution, any donation you make to Source keeps jazz alive 24/7, and your donations are not only greatly appreciated, but they're always tax deductible. The Power Hour has had over 125 amazing artists, well known and becoming well known, both musicians and vocalists. Some of the artists on the Power Hour include Eric Roberson, Mesa, Brian Culbertson, Paul Brown, Raheem DeVaughn, Reagan Whiteside, Alex Harris, Greg Adams, Tom Brown, Costello, Eric Darius, Pieces of a Dream, Kamasi Washington, Keiko Matsui, Kim Scott, Sheryl Crow, Billy Ocean, Annie Lennox, Dwelle, Maria Antoinette, Jay Brown, Miss Monet, Yulia, Samara Joy, Blake Aaron, Terry Wollman, Her, Aisha, Hillary Cole, Celine Johnson, Aaron Stevenson, Mavis Swan Poole, Cecily, Jeff Bradshaw, Dion Parson, Tammy McCann, Jeff Beck, Eric Burden, and many others. So I wanted to give you the range of the kinds of artists that we have in the Power Hour, and that's why we have such a large viewing and listening audience. Tonight is no exception. Tonight's guest is a saxophonist, composer, producer, and actor. Born in Somerville, New Jersey, and raised in Plainfield, New Jersey, not far from George Clinton of the Funkadelics Barbershop, by the way. He began playing the saxophone at age 8. He grew up in the church and was exposed to all the cultural elements of jazz, gospel, and soul. He came from an entertainment family. He worked in several agencies and began making a living along with session work that came in weekly, recording records with many Grammy-winning artists and producers. Early sax years were spent playing in the local clubs and among the famous Jersey Shore um, uh, uh, venues and events. And he was a sideman in various New York and LA studios. During that time, he released 2 instrumental solo albums. He's been a member of the Screen Actors Guild for over 25 years. He played the part of the saxophone player on the production and hit TV series Ally McBeal. He's also been in various other TV shows and national TV commercials. He's performed with and shared the stage with Jennifer Lopez, Elton John, Barry White, Joe Sample, Tina Turner, Mariah Carey, Tommy Mars, John Juliton, and many more. He's performed at venues including BB King's in New York, the Newport Jazz Festival, San Francisco Jazz Festival, Spaghettini's, the Catalina Club, and the Little Rock Jazz Festival. His latest singles have been on the contemporary charts for the past 3 years, and he has been recognized worldwide for his talented musicianship and his innovative sound and creativity as a composer. So please welcome to our show tonight, our special guest tonight, Michael Cates. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Mel. I decided to wear glasses after all. I couldn't see you.
Yeah, you seem darker now. You looks like your lighting went down from before.
It's still the same. Nothing's changed. I think
Yeah,
it's
it looks
because I'm in this tornado-infested hole here in Texas. The weather changes by the second. That's for
yeah.
sure.
Well, the lighting seems to have gone down. I don't know if you can do anything about it,
Yeah,
but
I can. Um,
okay, if you can, that would be great. So look, I'm glad you were able to make it. I've wanted to have you on the show for a while, and I'd like to start off every show by asking our special guests to tell everyone what's cooking. What are you doing in 2025? New releases, performances. What's going on?
well, we've got let's see, June 2nd. We're going to radio with a tune called 77 Hours. That is a more of a traditional blues jazz type of thing that I did a remix. I had put it out digitally. Um, the backstory about that too. Um, I got irritated, as I typically do from time to time, and I went in the back of my studio. I said to my wife, "I said, I'm going to the back. I've had it. It's a crappy day." Picked up my horn. I had the microphone on as I typically do, and I recorded that tune. It was a one taker, and I just put it aside. Um, it wasn't for a week later. I went to get some space on my computer, and I said, "What did this come from? Who played this? Where did this?" Well, that's what I did. So it turned out to be a pretty decent tune, and we ended up recording it. Brought in a bunch of my friends, and my band members, and now it's ready to go. And I probably I probably should have put it out a few years ago. It's 4 years old, but now it's remixed. Greg Manning mixed it. It sounds fantastic, and hopefully hopefully the radio stations will like it, or they'll relegate me to the ash heap of jazz history.
Yeah, are you planning to do any touring or anything like that?
Yeah, we will be going out. We're going to start in August. We have a show at the Bank of America Theater in Thousand Oaks, California. I live out there as you can see by my name. I'm right now at my studio in Texas and suffering by the second from allergies. Um, and I think after August, um, I've got some other commitments, some studio commitments. We'll probably hit on the East Coast. The band will be out there, and we'll hit those rooms that everybody's playing. And I won't come back to California to play probably until the first of the year. Gonna go to the East Coast and make some time there. I miss it. I grew up there, and I wanna see a lot of people.
Sounds good. Sounds like a plan. Let's talk about your musical roots. I'm a New Yorker. I was born in Brooklyn. I was raised in New York and Long Island. So I know you were raised in Plainfield, New Jersey, which is only about 30 miles outside of New York City. So, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your family? I know your family, your mom had an entertainment background. So why don't you talk a little bit about your family life and how you came to music and what that environment, being in the Northeast, so close to Manhattan, how did that influence your music?
Um, so talking about New York, uh, my most of my family's from Astoria, Queens. So
Huh.
I spent the majority of my time between Plainfield and Queens, and back and forth, back and forth. So yeah, back in the great '70s when New York was so clean, it was.
Yeah,
And people don't realize just how clean it is today. But
yeah,
boy, oh boy, it was something then.
yeah.
Um, my mother was a child actress and a singer, and she was exposed to the war bonds She was working with Mickey Rooney and Shirley Temple, and those are the people that she would act with. And so she was. I'm a kid. What do I know? I don't know that your mother was something. Besides your mother. Hey, Ma, I need some cookies. Shut up, you're fat. But my mother was she was doing movies and stuff at a very young age. So where I grew up, she worked at the local school. She was a librarian. Um, she hid a lot of that stuff from us. I just knew that she sang really loud at church, and people would always, tell her how great she was, and I'd be embarrassed because everybody's looking. But I mean, I'm going, what are they looking at? They're looking at a talented singer, and as it turned out, she was inspirational because growing up there, you probably know from when growing up in New York, you had two choices. You're going to be a thug and a punk, or you're going to grow up and do something decent.
Or
I
both.
was I was heading that way. I was heading that way. I had a chip on my shoulder, and I was dabbling in that area. I had a temper and a chip on my shoulder. What could go wrong? So so I got a saxophone instead. I So growing up there, you don't realize that the majority of the talent was there. And I got exposed to wonderful musicians, and my teachers were great. My entire education was the best ever. I don't know how I could have done any better. I was blessed. Uh, we know there's children that they fail. They go to schools and they have a terrible time and they're not getting the instruction that they need. Um, I didn't have that. I had a wonderful experience, but I excelled in the music. So in New Jersey, we had the regional bands. I'm sure most of the states do, and we had the state bands, and so I competed in those, and I would get the first chairs, and I would get another first chair, and by the time I got to high school, I wanted to play football. I wanted to do anything with that. I wanted to play football, and that's it. But I went to Catholic high school. That was my dad and my mother decided that if you go to this Catholic high school, you're not going to grow up to be a punk, and there's discipline, and you need it. So I went there, and they were right. They were very right, and I enjoyed every day of it. I'd have to say, I don't know who likes their high school years. 100%. Mine were great,
Yeah.
but I got to play football, so I got the athletic bug. And luckily for me, um, it was the type of school where you could negotiate. And I negotiated myself to play football and to do music. And life lesson, life's a negotiation, right? Um, so I got a chance to audition for a band that was picking for the best players in the country. It was called America's Youth in Concert. And I got the first chair tenor spot. So I'm 15 and I'm on tour. When our first stage we hit was Carnegie Hall. Uh,
Not a bad place to start.
I'm getting to the spoiled part. So when your first stage is Carnegie Hall, that's a life changer.
Yeah.
And I remember some of the guys on stage saying, "You know who played here? The Beatles played back there. This one played there. Let's get done. We're going to Italy." And so, that's what we did. We toured all throughout Europe, and we played every major venue in Europe. Um, it was nuts. And I was homesick. I wanted my mother's food because she's a fantastic cook. I looked after my mom. My dad was disabled, so I worried about her a lot. And uh, I didn't appreciate that tour until later. And I had mentors tell me, one day you're going to remember what you did, and it's going to make a difference in your life. And it did. And so, I became a teacher as well. and I tried to get students at a competitive level so they could experience these things that I did. And it was a big deal to be able to have, parents entrust their children to me on a private level to teach them and to watch them excel and move forward, both in music and professionally. Um, and that was all the result of growing up where I grew up, because the teachers were so important to me and they made such an impact. So I modeled a lot of what I would do in life after my great teachers.
It's interesting because I had an excellent education in public school. I didn't appreciate it at the time.
Who
Um,
does?
yeah, but I remember I took an honor English class and we had to read one novel a week
Mm,
in high school. Today, try to get somebody to read one novel, for the whole semester. Good luck. You
yeah.
know, so and I was in the band. I played clarinet,
Hmm.
and you had all these programs, and you had really good people who were heading these programs. And there was a lot of community support for it. So that's one of the big things that's changed. It's hard for a kid today to go to school and even have a music program.
Yeah.
You don't even have them anymore.
No.
At most schools they cut it out for budgetary reasons.
Yeah. It's ridiculous.
So you and I, we were lucky.
We were very, very lucky, and it bred in you the desire to compete. And I'm a very competitive guy, but having been having it been indoctrinated in competition as a kid, um, as you go forward and you get rejected 17,000 times, in your first year in the music business, or someone else is always going to do it better, and you should have done this, you should have done that, it's not this enough, it's not that enough. Um, those experiences, they kind of get you ready for what you're going to experience later on down the road.
It's interesting, Michael, to hear you say that because I had a mentor when I went to college who told me that the last thing you want to do is compete. Let everybody else compete. You want to carve out your own space that is non-competitive. Let people try to find you. Don't go looking for them. And it was interesting advice because he talked about strategies and to find niches where there's nobody else there, and you own it. And I look, whether you got advice about being competitive or I got advice of being non-competitive, there were people to guide us. There were mentors and
Yeah.
people that cared about us, and that's what's gone from music a lot today. Even the record labels, they had A&R, so
Hmm.
they would teach you, tell you how to dress, what radio stations you're going to be on, how to do an interview, even shows your music for you. But you had experts and people that cared not only about their own careers but about your career.
And
And
the intellect of your teachers,
yeah,
and their integrity mattered. My music teacher, just to further that point, was he was humble. His integrity was so high that he said to my mother, "I can't take him any further. So why don't you have him seek private instruction?" He goes, "And I'm going to recommend this guy." So they recommended this man. His name was John Plaka. And John was a famous tenor player in the big band era. He became my teacher. He became my second father, is what he became. And that man kept me straight, and he kept me grounded, and you know, and he kept my shoes shined. I'll tell you why. When you're taking lessons, and you're watching your instructors tap his feet, and you see the shot, you can see yourself in the man's shoes.
yeah.
It gets you catch that disease. So yeah, to this day, my shoes look like glass, and that's I can thank him for that as well.
This is a conversation that's mostly almost exclusively about you, but I can tell you when I went for my first college teaching job, they concluded the interview by saying, "Tell us one reason why we should hire you." And I said, "I can read." And they hired me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. It helps.
Yeah, and that's we're both in the same kind of place. You were absorbing everything, that you could from the people around you, which is what I did too. But there were people that were worth absorbing. And
Because you knew they were better
yeah,
than you, or they had attained something that you would like to be able to attain, and so you looked up to them, and
yeah,
they were wonderful people, and they were all veterans for the most part. Um,
yeah.
and and of course that made an impact in my life as well. So yeah, just great people. I lost him about 9 years ago, and I was on the West Coast, and I didn't get to attend his funeral, but you know, I always feel like he's with me.
Well, I want the audience to hear some of your music, and I want to start off by playing the first song, your most recent single out there. I think as you said, it's coming out June 2nd, but we have the privilege of playing 77 hours. So
Great.
why don't you tell everybody the backstory in this song? Whether you wrote it, co-wrote it, who's on the production with you. Why don't you tell people about it?
So I started telling you this story earlier. I got irritable, and I went in the back and recorded this tune,
Right.
and it turned out to be something good. So I called my buddies that are in my band. Larry Antonino's the bass player. He's with Pablo Cruz. He's been with everybody from Barry Manilow down the road. He's a tremendous talent and singer. Sergio Gonzalez. I've been playing with Sergio since 1996.
Wow.
He's
Okay.
pretty much the only drummer I work with too, because he's the best drummer as far as I'm concerned. Him and Steve Gadd are the same drummer. He'll kill me for saying that, but that's how I feel. Then what we did was we went in the studio, and we burned those tracks down, and the song evolved and it got better. I called up my buddy Rob Mullins, a very famous keyboardist who he's ridiculously talented. Let's put it that way. He's like a savant. He got on that tune, and there's an extended version which you don't have, and he played this pretty long solo, and he just tore it up. I mean, there was really no reason for me to be on the tune. I mean, it just featured Rob and left it that way. But anyway, he got on there, and and myself. And as far as guitar went, I think, oh yeah, Randy Jacobs, the one and only. He did the
Yeah.
guitar work. So when we finally had that assembled and we had all those tracks, it was hard to not pursue it. It pursued itself. And Randy had said, he goes, people have to hear this. And I said, why? He goes, trust me, they just do. So Randy, I hope you're right. That's all I can say.
I got a question for you. I have a few friends out there who play guitar. Do you know Terry Woolman or Blake Aaron?
Blake, yeah, he's up with the same agent that I'm with. Blake's fantastic.
Yeah.
He's just fantastic. I'm supposed to be getting with him on my next single is done, but I think Blake is going to take a look at it and do some work on it.
Yeah, great guy, great musician. All right, let's play for everybody. 77 Hours, okay, by Michael Tate. So here we go.
All right, thanks.
Really nice.
Let there be light.
Yeah, you got some people listening in already. Curtis Jones says smooth blues, bro. You
Very
got
nice.
some other ones here. Terrence Carter loves your sax work. It rocks the house. Clarissa Savage, nice break. Who's playing keys?
Rob Mullins,
Yeah, she
the
really
one and
liked it.
only.
Yep. And another one, Andy Breckenridge, reminds me of Stan Kenton. Great groove.
That works for me.
Does it remind you of Stan Kenton?
Probably not. However, I loved Stan Kenton. Geez, I would think I was 12, maybe not even 12. I went to see Maynard Ferguson, and he was playing at a Holiday Inn in North Brunswick, New Jersey. And who do I see in the band? Is the organist from my church.
That's funny.
That's fact, yeah.
That's great. Well, you got fans, new fans, or people who know your music, and they're listening in already tonight. So
I
let's go on
appreciate
and
it.
talk. Let's talk a little bit more. You worked for several agencies, and you began making a living, and you did a lot of session work that came in weekly. And it was from an R&B producer who you collaborated with named Paul Kaiser. Why don't you tell us about that relationship and about that collaboration, that period?
So in Plainfield,
Excuse me.
roughly a half a block, there's a little area called Fanwood. Fanwood is there's nothing remarkable about Fanwood. However, there was this guy and he had a studio. It was in an office building. It was like super clandestine. You would have thought it was a CIA gig. And his name was Paul Kaiser. And Paul, he had Trumpet Records. He owned a record label. Turns out Paul had Grammys and hits, and back in the 50s and 60s, he was pretty much everywhere with everybody. Um, some of the hits have failed my memory right now, but they'll come to me shortly. Anyway, Paul heard me play. Some one of the fellows there, his name was Alan Douches. Alan had recorded a demo for me, and he was using Paul's room. So Paul was back there in the control room, and I'm wondering who's this interloper in our studio. He only owns it, and he said, "I like how you sound. Why don't you come work for me?" And I said, well, "How? What do you want me to do?" He goes, I'm going to pay you money, and you're doing my saxophone work. I do a lot of commercials. I do a lot of various artists, and that's what he did. He's paying me a weekly
Hmm.
amount of money, and I mean, I'm thinking to myself, well, I must have died and gone to heaven. Someone's actually going to pay me money, uh, and it was the beginning of a lot of stuff. Um, and Paul, he was kind of a mentor. I don't want to say he was a full mentor. We used to argue, but I got to know him well, and I appreciate him. And he offered me a record deal. So I had signed a record deal with him a long time ago, longer than people need to know, or they'll think I'm Methuselah. Uh, so I did a deal with him, and he had a guy by the name of, he is deceased now, a very talented R&B singer by the name of Terry Tate. Terry was famous he would be famous for a tune called "Babies Having Babies." That became a huge hit for him. And well, that gave my age away. And at that time, he was doing I believe it was 10 tunes for Atlantic Records. And Paul hired me on for at least two or three of those tunes. And that got me into Sylvia Rohn over at Atlantic Records. And that introduced me into Sony, and that brought me into this one and that one. It's a networking game.
Sure.
Everything's a networking. And if it wasn't for Paul Kaiser, I would have met nobody. You would have been in the back of the line, hoping maybe somebody will know who you are or like the way you sound. That opened many, many doors. Uh, but the one thing I learned from Paul was to have your business in order at all times in this racket called the music industry. And your publishing and your mechanicals and your copyrights and make everything in order so no one can steal them from you, even though they do. Um, and that was helpful because I
Yeah.
was pretty young, and I probably had less clue than I even thought I was going to have.
It's those serendipitous relationships sometimes that can make careers. It's very vicarious. It's not unplanned, but it happens.
No,
You
yeah.
know, it's, man, yeah, you can look at these almost any artist you look at, and there's always been luck standing right in the doorway with them.
Hmm. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, I've had that experience myself. Now, in your early years, you played a lot of the local clubs and you performed in the Jersey Shore, and you were sideman in various New York and LA studios. During that time, you released two instrumental solo albums. What brought you to finally being able to release your music? What happened?
I think more than anything else, during that time, I had a, I guess I had a need to do it more than anything else. Was I ready to do it? Probably not. Who's ever really ready to display their most their most personal things that you've done, and in those days, you're recording onto tape. There's no computers. There's no edit like they do today. So you are what you are. But I did that, and I made a decision. I had a manager at the time, and we did a licensing deal in Europe. And I'd say during that period, 3 years, we sold a ton of records. And we couldn't have done that in the US because the
Yeah,
music was not the same radio friendly stuff that they were playing. It wasn't the smooth jazz era yet, but it was starting to go that way. And so we went to Europe, did more of a fusion record, and people loved it. And
you know,
we got
it's
paid.
interesting. People that are artists in the U.S., if they really want to make it, they go to Europe, make it there, and they come back here already made, and it makes a
Hmm.
huge difference. If you're in Europe, you want to come to the U.S. because you can crack the U.S. market. It's going across the lake both ways that really musicians have to make that journey.
Yeah, uh, and the thing with Europe too was, I have a love for the place. I went there, pretty young, and I
Mhm.
wanted to go back and see a lot of these places I had already played as a kid, and I had the opportunity, uh, and we did very well. Here's the problem though, when you just hit on it. So you do so well, you just think you're gonna slip on into the U.S. and you're gonna do well. Get out of, you're done. It's
Yeah.
not going to happen. Your thinking is flawed. There's an order here, and you got to follow that order. So, especially with radio, I mean, we can talk about that all day, but radio at that particular point was pretty interesting. There was a lot of great tunes on the radio, and then one day, which would be the second record, the switch got flipped, and it was no longer the same thing. You couldn't have distorted guitars and you couldn't have fusion-esque music. It had to be smooth jazz and vocals. That's what it was.
Yep.
And I was not that guy. Certainly not then. And I don't believe I'm that guy today. Though I compete in that arena, uh, I try to do my own thing as best I can.
And you do
So,
it well.
well,
But
thank you.
from there, you moved on to LA. What made you move to the West Coast?
I had, my family had taken me out there when I was pretty young for a wedding, and I remember telling my mother, I said, "Hey, Ma, I'm going to live here. I love this place. Why do we have to go back to Jersey? This place is miserable. I hate that place." But love hate as a kid. Beach, miles of beaches. They had fast food you never even heard of on the East Coast there, and when you're a hungry kid, that's all that matters in life. What are you gonna? You're gonna get a Del Taco. So it's like, there's a Del Taco. We don't have those. We didn't see Mexican food in New Jersey until mid '80s.
Whataburger.
Most, yeah. Well, that's Texas. The In and Out. In and
In and
Out.
out.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
and
In
out.
and
Yeah,
Out.
yeah.
There's nothing better than, I don't have a sponsorship. I will accept one, and but I don't have one. So I went out there. I had gone out a couple of times, but I made it permanent in '95, '96, and I met my wife, and it was a fluke, strange thing the way it happened. They were hiring a producer for the band she was in, and I basically was being interviewed, and I've seen her every day pretty much since that day. That's how that worked out.
Okay.
And I didn't produce the band because they were terrible.
You never told her that, right?
No, she knows.
Oh, okay. So, look, you got into acting, and you joined the Screen Actors Guild, and you've been a member for 25 years. How did that happen?
Well, just it's not a correction. I don't need to correct the host, but
You
I did
can.
not join the union. The union joined me. That's
Okay.
how that works. So I got a call one just out of the blue for a couple of music videos, and it was wonderful. The whole experience was great. And I told the person that brought me in, I said, I wouldn't mind if you would call me some more because I could do this. And they said, yeah, okay. Next time something comes in, we'll give you a call. Well, at that time, my wife was reading the casting calls, and this guy called me, and he said, there's a commercial you might want to read for. And it was a Verizon commercial. And it was before the guy with the glasses. Do you hear me now, guy? This was back when they were still doing regular commercials, and they did a New Orleans scene, and it was a great big spectacle. It was, I believe, all commercials have a the title. It was called Anthem. The Anthem commercials were done with big directors and huge set designers, and so I got that part again as a saxophonist, uh, and it was ridiculous. The treatment, the money, the fame and fortune of doing commercials. I said to my wife, I said, if I could do anything, I would do commercials for the rest of my life. Your health insurance is covered, but I was not in the union yet. But when you work on a Screen Actors Guild set
You
and you
have to
get
be in
paid,
the.
you are now in the union.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my $640 went right to the union, and that was the end of that money.
Yeah.
And then the envelopes started showing up in my mailbox, and I thought it was tax information and garbage. It was royalties. And man, the royalties kept coming in. And I said to my wife, I have to do this. This is where it's at. It's unlike the music business where you're struggling every 5 inches. You go 5 inches and you get 20 steps back. That's how that works. And so it was good. And then I got the Ally McBeal part,
How'd that
and
happen? How'd you get the Ally McBeal part?
I got a call from the same guy, by the way. And he said, they got a part that you need to be in, and this was the Tina Turner show. And I says, I know Tina, and I went and I read for that. I got that part, and I played that. That was 90. I'm going to say it was 98. And from that point forward, for the most part, I didn't do every single show, but I did the majority of them. I was there at the last show and the cast call for extras and all that. I remember there was just tons of extras, and they made a big huge production out of it. I know I've seen the footage of it on YouTube. Um, I didn't realize how big it was, and that was the last show, and and that was it. That was 2004.
Wow.
So we had a very long run, and I
Great,
was I
great
was
story.
super lucky.
Let's play another song for our listening audience. They're getting to know you, and I want them to really know your music. Next song I have listed is All Saxed Up. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that song, and we'll play it.
I wanted to play something upbeat and fun, and like we would do live. And I didn't really care if it was smooth enough or it didn't fill in all the different categories that I need to be in. I said, I'm just going to do this, and I love it. This will single the beginning of next year. It's the same guys are on it. My guys, we only work together. When I'm recording, I won't go outside of the family. Nothing gets out of the side of the family.
Use guys.
Use guys. It's the family. Family is everything, you know.
So, did you co-write this with someone?
Nope. And typically I don't. There's a guy by the name of Darwin Martin. We wrote New Lives in Newport together. Darwin's a good friend, and I've worked with him for years. We're writing right now together again. We stopped writing together for a while, and we all went out and did other things. But for the most part, I'm doing some stuff with Rob now, Rob Mullins. But I write with Darwin, or I pretty much just stick to myself. I have
Okay.
so many songs in my head. It's sad. You know, there's no brains left in my head. It's just songs.
That's what makes an artist successful. You know, the music never ends. It just never does.
That's for sure.
So let's play All Saxed Up for everybody. This is All Saxed Up by Michael Cates. That's great. Such a great song. I love that. You got some comments. Somebody said, "Nice edge." Paul Winton. What's jazz without a strong sax and bass? Kudos. Nathan Sellinger. Soulful. Love it. Mary Dodge. Is this on an album?
It will be, but for now it'll be a single, probably in March, coming up in March. It could be the next single. There's two right now. We're I'm not sure. The agent is probably more sure than I am. But if it was me, I would be the next single. I'd put that out. In fact, I would have put it in June, but I didn't have it. I didn't have a say in it.
Why don't you have a say? What's going on with that?
Well, because people that are smarter than me have decided that 77 hours needed to be released through radio. I
Yeah,
told you I am a very humble guy, and I defer to people that are, that they've been doing this thing successfully. How can you argue with Adam Leibowitz, one of the greatest radio promoters out there? Do you feel strong about 77? I'll do what I'll walk that walk with him.
I mean, I have great respect for Adam, but I'll tell you a quick story about producers or people that arrange for airtime. There was a guy who was named Rod Stewart, and he was putting together his first album, and he had a song on there that they wanted him to take off and replace, and he refused. He kept insisting, "No, this song's going to do well." And they said, "No, it's a boring line. Nobody's going to listen to it." So he left it on there. It's called Maggie May.
Yeah, a real clunker, that tune.
Real clunker, that tune. Yeah, yeah. They tried to talk him out of it, but he wouldn't let them. He really wanted that on there. So
I think 77 is probably a very, I think it's very viable. I just question maybe it's too traditional for this market, but we'll find out.
you know, again, I have great respect for Adam, but I kind of agree with you. I just think that well, saxed up has more of an edge to it, and more relevant to the market. But we'll see. We could be wrong.
Yeah, it's just my bank account. That's all.
That's all. I have no vested interest. So what
Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Me either. I've detached from everything. I'm void from reality. It's if I thought about it, it could probably drive a person crazy.
Yeah, I love this conversation. We're starting to run down on time, so I'm going to have to have you back again and skip some of these questions I wanted to ask you about. But right now, what I want to ask you about is a thought question. It's a bucket list question. If you could collaborate with any songwriter, musician, vocalist, producer, arranger at any time in history, any place in the world, who would be number one in your bucket list and why?
That is coming to me. I don't have. Uh, okay, let's go to classical. I'll go right to classical. Anton Dvorak.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, I'll go right there. I mean, there's three or four others that I would have said more contemporary. In a society where we're having problems remembering our shoe size, I'm wondering that anybody even remembers who Anton Dvorak is, but phenomenal
I
composer.
do.
And the thing that I enjoy the most about him, having played most of his arrangements, um, they last. They never go out of your memory. So Dvorak to me, it's almost the pop approach. Write a real strong hook, and send that hook. Let that hook. So when you listen to his classical pieces, that hook is always there, and it carries. So yeah, I'd like to do some work with him, but I don't know if I'm going to arrange it on this lifetime, but maybe the next one.
Interesting choice. Again, I'm always surprised by the choices that artists make, but that's a good one. I like that.
I was going to go to Barry Manilow, believe it or not.
Yeah, that would be a great choice also.
It was hard
You know,
between the two, but I went to Dvorak. I love Barry Manilow. So,
I mean, he's written more music than you can imagine. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, Larry, my bass player, played for Manilow, and That's about as close as I've got to his camp.
Yeah. Well, look, I have so much more to talk to you about, but I want to play another song so people really get a good feel for your music. I want to play New Lives. So let me play New Lives, and then afterwards you can come back and we can chat about it for a couple of minutes, okay?
All right.
Wow. That's so beautiful. Mary Dodge, is this on an album?
Yes, it is. And
What
that
album
was
is that?
on the album that I had done in 2022. Um, so that's New Lives. Um, that was the name of the album. It also went out as a single, and I did an EP not too long ago. I haven't done another full album, but I've done an EP. I actually have so many songs that I've got two EPs. So I think I'm going to let another one go after this single comes out. So there'll be another one. Maybe I'll include it.
Well, that's a beautiful tune. Alan Levine, loved your music this evening, but this one really is the most emotional. Thank you.
It was, and it is. And thank you, Mr. Levine. I appreciate that.
Rosie Callahan, is this one on your album? Another person asked that too.
Yep, it's on.
Okay.
It's New Live. It's on the New Lives album, 2022.
Okay. Um, Dwayne Mulligan, incredible sax, cool.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you.
People are loving your music tonight. As I am too.
I appreciate it. I spent enough time hating myself.
Well, if you weren't a good musician, you would, all good musicians hate themselves.
I talked to David Sanborn at one point. Him and Eric Clapton had the same conversation, and they formed a club. It was called the I Suck Club. It goes on more minutes than you have left, but I'm a charter member of that club. So
John Lennon could hardly listen to any of his music. He always heard the mistakes.
that's all you hear.
Yep,
That's the
yep,
truth.
yep, yep. Well, look, we're running out of time. I wanted to talk about Newport Nights, and I want you to talk a little bit about that collaboration, but we'll have to do this a different time. Let me ask you this question, then we'll play your last song of the evening. Every artist evolves or perishes, and you've gone through big career changes, and you actually had two careers at least, one in film and one in music, and although they do overlap. So, what do you see yourself in music 5 years from now? Is there something that you haven't done that you had in the back of your mind that you really want to do, but for some reason haven't done? And what's next for you?
I want to be able to continue doing what I'm doing, but I want to re-enter the fusion market that doesn't exist. Uh, I will subliminally incorporate little bits at a time. Hopefully, there will be more progressive-minded radio program directors that'll let it go. But I think that people tend to get bored, uh, and rightly so. I mean, there's a lot of similarity in the smooth jazz music, and oftentimes we're punished for doing a little bit, putting a little edge in. I'm an edgy guy. I can't stop being who I am. You
Yeah,
know, we have that complaint. Me and my wife talk about it all the time. Do you have to be so edgy? I said, yeah, I kind of do. That's who I
yeah.
am. That's how I get it out. I like to put more edge, a little more fire into this stuff, and see where it gets me. It might get me unemployed, but at least I'll be true.
Yeah, look, I really respect what you're doing, and you and I had this discussion before the show started. When I'm looking for artists to have on the Power Hour, I'm looking for artists that step out. You know, I, the ones that play within a genre, and really, the only word I can use is a very commercialized. I find that the music is redundant and doesn't speak to me. But when I hear somebody that has a certain inflection, a certain, way of creating a hook and a verse that makes sense to me, that's a little outside the mainstream. That's what I look for because that's what jazz was always about. It was never about being consistent. It was about being inconsistent.
It's an exploration.
Yeah, it is.
It
So
is a constant exploration.
it is. So we just talked about where you go from here and what you want to do. So that's a good segue into the last song. Where do we go from here? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about this track and then we'll play it and wind up.
Um, this track, this goes to Alan Levine about the emotional. This one's probably as emotional. It's just a little bit more, got a little more spice going with it. Um, this is a very favorite tune of mine, and it didn't do that well on radio. Um,
Hmm.
we'll let everybody be the judge.
Yep. Well, I've heard the tune and I love it. So here's Michael Cates with Where Do We Go From Here? Oh, Michael, that's really great. I see more comments came in. Let me see what we have here. Um, this is from the same guy, Dwayne Mulligan. He said, "No one has commented on your intros. They are highly stylized and brings you into the song."
I appreciate that, Dwayne. I really do take my time developing a nice intro. That's important to me.
Great composition, great arrangement, smooth soul. Not smooth jazz, but smooth soul. I like that.
I like it too, Joel. Thank you. Thank you much.
Ken Washington, excellent, great sax.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
you have quite a number of comments today. You have a lot of new fans or people that know your music already. So it's been look, this has been a wonderful evening, and I'm so sorry that we don't have more time to go into so much more about your music and also your career, which is really very interesting because it's gone in so many directions already.
it's been a very, very much a whirlwind career. I'll put it at that matter. That's for
Well,
sure. A whirlwind.
well, I've really enjoyed every minute of this, and I'm glad you took the time to spend the evening with everybody. I
Thank you
really
so
do
much.
appreciate it.
Mel, it was I I do a number of interviews, and there's a thing. It's a thing. This was fun. I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it. So I'll come anytime
Good.
you want.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love the music and I love the people who make it, so maybe that's what makes this a little different,
It's
you
like being with a friend I've known for a long time. It's probably the
Thank.
New York accent is helping me too because we
Oh,
both sound like we're from the same place.
I've lived in Maryland for 25 years. I don't have a southern drawl.
Yeah, you can't let go of what you really are though. It's not going to happen. Not with me either. Though I
Yeah,
try.
no, I get it. I get it. So listen, you take care of yourself, and I will definitely have you back again when you have some new music. Let me know, and let's stay in touch with each other.
Absolutely.
And tell everybody where they can find you, or become a fan, or your website, your music.
Well, you got michaelcates.com. That's always there. You've got Instagram as well, Michael Cates Music. Um, those are pretty much the two places to come and look and see. And then I don't think I do. I don't really do anything with Facebook or anything like that. I just don't. And for the most part, there's a guy that does the Instagram stuff for me, but my wife manages the website and she makes sure everything's up there. So that's the best place to go.
Terrific. Well, once again, you have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
All right, Mel. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Good night.
Bye bye.
Well, next week we have another wonderful guest. This was a wonderful evening. I really enjoyed it so much, and he's a wonderful guest. It's been very special. So, next week we have another wonderful guest. His name is Lisa Adio, and she knows Michael. We know each other, and Lisa is doing very, very well. She's just had a recent #1 hit in jazz, and she's had a collection of them, and she's really doing fabulously well. And we're honored to have her on the show too. So everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show tonight, and tune in next week, and we'll have another edition of the Jazz Confusion Power Hour. So I'm signing off now, and everybody have a great weekend. I'm Mel Albin. I'm the host and the founder of the Jazz Confusion Power
My name
Hour.
is Dion Parson, and I'm honored to share my passion of music with you, our listening audience, through my cultural heritage.
Things can change for you too. If you want to be brand new, that is absolutely possible.